Hey folks, Jason Pye, editor-in-chief of Peach Pundit, joined today by the usual crew, which is Scott Turner and Buzz Brockway. We also have a very special guest, State Representative Bert Reeves, Bert, you're out of Cobb County, right?
Marietta, Kennesaw, yes, sir.
Well, and he's a Republican member of the legislature, so we're really happy to have you today. And I guess we'll start it off. Crossover day was Monday, and
hmm
I know that is always a hectic time in the Georgia General Assembly. So what the hell happened?
it was a wild day for me. I mean, we were there till about 11 o'clock. There wasn't a whole lot of controversial issues that ended up coming up. The Ed Setzler's House Bill 290, which is the right to visit bill, went to the floor and was debated, and it was actually not, I guess, not unprecedented, but the speaker actually relinquished the chair and came down and spoke in favor of the bill and really made the case for the work that Setzler's done on it and asked everybody to vote for it. It was interesting, and Ed's worked really hard on that. And there's still some concern on the issue, and it's one of those things that I don't think that it's I don't think it's going to get to the point where it's quote perfect, right? But it's a matter of getting it done, and they will require some things that hospital organizations and nursing homes are going to have to do, but it's one of those things that they're just going to have to figure out how to do it. But the other issue for me is I've been carrying the repeal of the citizens arrest law as a result of the Ahmaud Arbery murder and tragedy a little bit more than a year ago. And that bill was called just before dinner, or the dinner hour, and just remarkably, I wasn't expecting this, but received unanimous support from the House. It was truly, I think, if you'd asked anybody in the building, nobody was predicting that that was going to happen, and it's something that I feel really good about. And this is one of those issues, and I'm certainly happy to dive in and talk about it. But it's one of those issues where I think that by the time we got to the end, I was able to successfully educate people on what it is and what it isn't. There was a lot of misinformation being put out. And I think that I was able to, combat all that with truth and case law and explaining how Georgia law works. And I think that the House honored that, and somehow I got unanimous votes, and I truly did expect that.
I think that that particular case impacted all of us pretty hard, considering the time when it happened. I mean, it happened around the same time that George Floyd was murdered up in Minneapolis, and Breonna Taylor. And
Mm-hmm.
I think all of us are really sympathetic to a lot of the issues raised by the protesters, not the rioters, but the protesters who were protesting against protesting for police reforms, in addition to reforms like this. So, I mean, I think it's great that you were carrying that bill, Scott. Buzz, I'll turn it over to you two.
Yeah, I just want to, for real quick, if I could jump in as a member of the legislature last year when the news broke, right? We had when we get into the the legislative session, our head is into policy. We're getting the weeds on bills. We have a million things coming at us all at once. And news of the Ahmaud Arbery case did not break
May.
until several weeks, if not months,
It was about
after
3 months. It was
three
almost
months,
two
right?
and a half months after it happened when the video was released, and nobody had awareness of this. And there was an effort there was the sitting DA in Brunswick, who's no longer in office. Praise the Lord. She recused herself because one of the
Officers.
one of the defendants is used to work for her, and the DA next door wrote a letter justifying their conduct under the citizens arrest law, which was frankly entirely misplaced because the law which we're seeking to repeal, it states that in order to quote make a private person citizen's arrest on somebody, you have to have seen them commit a crime. And by their own admission, they didn't see him do anything wrong. They just chased him down, and we saw what happened. The whole world saw what happened. And so, you know, that was just kind of unthinkable that they tried to bury it like that.
Yeah.
And in doing so, it's really kind of caused us to look at this, you know, this very outdated law. It came into it's, if you trace its roots, it goes all the way back to around 1275 is where concept of citizens arrest first emerged in Europe. And in Georgia, it was codified in 1863, right in the middle of Civil War. You know, it was, you know, there weren't police officers or cars or phones or that 911 dispatch back then, obviously. The law was put into place so that you could, you know, reclaim your property, but you cannot divorce it from the issue of slavery and reclaiming your slaves and attempting to detain escaped slaves. You also cannot divorce that issue from what was decades of lynchings that have took place in Georgia that were justified under the concept of citizens arrest. And you know, I took the time to do that research myself, and that's just the truth. You can't divorce those issues. That this is the shady history of part of that bill. But then we get to where we are in the world today, and we ask ourselves, why do we want to embolden private citizens, untrained persons, not law enforcement? Why do we want to embolden people to participate in what is undoubtedly inherently dangerous situations of, you know, chasing people down upon, you know, what sometimes amounts to speculation, as was the case in Brunswick? And so you know, and so kind of from there, the idea and really the need and the necessity to repeal the law came into place. But then with that, there were some common sense things that you know, this is one of those things that it gets hard to explain. And as a lawyer, I try to be very deliberate about keeping it in layman's terms. But we have black and white letter law, right? That our code of Georgia, but then we have case law, and case law, you know, you can't just look at the code of Georgia. You have to consider case law. And the concept of citizens arrest has been used through jurisprudence by the Court of Appeals and Supreme Court to embed certain rights, like, for example, for you know, loss prevention officers at Target or Walmart to detain somebody, for police officers if they are out of jurisdiction. There's a lot of rules. Police have limited jurisdiction, but sometimes when they have been outside of their jurisdiction and they see a crime happen, there's one line of case law that says that a police officer is technically on duty 24 hours a day. And then there's also a line of case law that says that if a police officer is outside of their jurisdiction and they see somebody commit a crime, that it is perfectly okay for them to engage in an arrest of that situation. The logic being that they would have that right as a citizen under citizens arrest to do that. So we've got police through case law, the ability for police to make out of jurisdiction arrests, or if they're in hot pursuit and they cross the county line or something to that effect, they don't have to abandon that stop because it comes from this concept of citizens arrest. So if we repeal citizens arrest, then all of the precedent and case law that kind of comes with that goes away as well. So what we've done with the bill is we're repealing the citizens arrest code sections, but we are what I call patchwork. We're just patching back in some of these very common sense things, like we want Walmart, Target, retailers to be able to reasonably detain people they suspect of shoplifting and call the police, right? We want, if a police officer is in pursuit of someone and they cross the county line, then we want the police officer to still be able to make that stop. Sometimes a city police is not allowed to go outside of their city. It happens all the time where the stop begins in the city limits and then you cross over to the unincorporated or into another city. So what we've done is we have replaced these concepts in other parts of the code section so that these common sense things that need to happen will be able to continue to happen, but be very careful with the rights of shop owners and restaurant owners and Wade inspectors and private security, all who have an embedded right to make detentions and arrests under citizen's arrest. We are not calling that arrest. We're calling it detention. We're removing the word arrest from anybody other than the law enforcement concept, because when we talk about arrest, we all think of, we think of police, right? We don't, nobody really conceptualizes private people making legal arrests. So what this bill does is it repeals citizens arrest and then puts back into other code sections some of these common sense things that will allow it to certain detentions to continue. But what, and this has been the education part that I've been tasked with. There's been a lot of, y'all know how this works. It happens all the time. There's been a lot of misinformation and a lot of assumption that somehow this is impacting our ability to defend ourselves, and that it's affecting our self-defense and defense of others. And that's just the furthest thing from the truth. In fact, if you read the bill actually explicitly excludes all of our self-defense laws. So 16-3, 21, 22, 23, 24, defense of yourself, defense of others, defense of your habitation, and defense of your personal property. Those are separate code sections that stand on their own. We're not touching them. They will remain as they are. Within those code sections, we are embedded with the ability to use reasonable force to protect ourselves and others, our house and our property. And the continuum of force accelerates based on the type of force that we perceive is being threatened against us or other people. Like, for example, if I see somebody committing a forcible felony against another person, then I am permitted to use deadly force. That is the law now, and it will be the law if this goes into law and if this passes the Senate and becomes law. That will remain the law. Nothing's going to change with that. So here's the scenario, and this is really important, y'all. This is a scenario that everybody was coming at me with. Well, what if I pull into my driveway and I get out of my car and I see, and some guy walks out of my house and I hear my wife screaming, "Help me, help me." Well, Bert, if you repeal citizens arrest and that guy walks out of the house, he's not committing a crime anymore. I'm not preventing or terminating a crime anymore. So I just got to let that guy walk away. We need citizens arrest in order to be able to stop that. So there's not a ton of case law on this issue because these cases just don't get to that point very much, and citizens arrest is very rarely used. And most of the time in self-defense situations, the police never make a case, or the DA doesn't bring charges, or the judge grants an immunity defense. So very rarely does a jury even hear those cases. Well, I found a case from 2004, Court of Appeals case, Robinson v. State, that this fact pattern is amazing. A guy is a mailman, and he's out on his mail route, and somebody calls him and says, "You need to go check on your house." So he drives home in his driveway, and his front door is open, parks his car, goes in the back door into his house, and in the living room encounters a burglar. And the burglar's got a bunch of the mailman's stuff on the couch. He's obviously getting ready to steal it. The mailman tells the burglar, "Freeze." The burglar then assaults the mailman, takes off running out of the house, doesn't take anything with him, doesn't steal anything, takes off running out the house. So here's what the mailman did. This is an unbelievable fact pattern. Mailman chases after the guy, gets into his mail truck, chases him 2 blocks down the street. Then the burglar hangs a left and runs into a yard. So the mailman puts his truck in park, gets on foot, chases the guy down by foot, actually catches him, and then the burglar beats the you-know-what out of the mailman. And now the burglar turns around and runs to the mail truck. The guy gets up and runs after the guy, and now the burglar has now taken the mail truck and is starting to drive down the road. And the case doesn't go into this, but somehow this mailman is awesome. I want to meet this guy now. This mailman actually gets into the mail truck and disengages the truck and stops it, pulls the burglar out of the truck, and the case says he used an oak branch. I don't know how big it was, but I have been telling people that it was at least 15 feet long. Uses an oak branch to restrain this guy until the police arrived. And when I finally found that case, I had been telling people for weeks, like, listen, the law allows us to reasonable force. Reasonable force is an umbrella, and there's a lot that falls underneath that. And stopping someone and detaining them until the police comes is part of that. And everybody's, well, I don't see it. Well, it doesn't say that. And I finally, when I found this case, it was like pulling the needle out of the haystack. And I've been able, everybody that was coming at me with these fact patterns, once I demonstrated the precedent in case law, everyone disengaged. They stopped arguing with me because they realized that I had disproven their points, that the law is there. There's common sense here, and you are allowed, if someone's committing a crime against you, you're not obligated to just let them run away.
Bert,
if somebody's committing a crime against, like, here's where the line is though, and this is important caveat. If I come home and I pull in my driveway and I see a guy walking out of my neighbor's house with a TV, I can say, stop, freeze, I'm calling the police. I can do all that. But if we repeal citizen's arrest, I cannot chase that guy down and tackle him and arrest him. Okay. And I think that's a good thing, because there is a point where these inherently dangerous situations, we want to avoid them. The value of life and the value of property is something, that we value life above property. And no matter what I might think is going on with my neighbor's house, I don't know for sure what's going on. And so under that scenario, I would not be permitted to tackle that person and arrest them. And so that's the essential kind of change of what this will bring. Most people in those situations call 911. They don't randomly chase people down when they don't have full information. But that's the practical difference.
Bert, let me ask you a quick question. I want to give Buzz a chance to ask a question too. So please just answer this real quickly. Is there an organized effort against this bill?
The Georgia Sheriff's Association strongly opposed the bill. They opposed. I worked with them on crafting language that clarified their jurisdiction, because again, we had to take these out of jurisdiction arrest powers issues and we had to plug that into the code section that deals with arrest powers. And they told me we created confusion, et cetera, et cetera. And I worked with them and finally got to language that clearly made that there was no confusion. And so I believe I satisfied them on that ground. The other thing they kept telling me over and over again is, we believe that if somebody commits a crime against someone, they should be able to detain that person. When I found the case and presented that case, I haven't heard from them since. My understanding is that they are engaging in the Senate, same type of information. So I've got, my job now is to educate the Senate in the same way that I educated the House and got everybody comfortable, and really, present factual information to these hypotheticals that frankly, are just defy common sense and certainly defy what the law says.
Well, Bert, congratulations on, getting the bill passed out of the House at least. And I applaud you and Governor Kemp for taking this issue up, because it is a big deal. One other aspect of this that's troubled me for a while since I found out about it, there are people out there who, on the fringes of political thought, who think that they have the power and the authority to go make a citizen's arrest of elected officials, bring them before a grand jury that they impanel, and attempt to enforce, convict them of whatever. And this, this sounds crazy, but in 2016, a judge had to issue a restraining order against a guy who was stalking the Clayton County District Attorney, attempting to make a citizen's arrest on him because he wouldn't expose some sort of corruption that this person was convinced of. So I guess I want to make sure things like that would no longer be legal should this bill become law, right? Random citizens can't go.
Under the concept of citizen's arrest, the only way that you are empowered to make a, quote, private person arrest is you have to witness a crime. Mm-hmm. And the scenario that you described, I don't know that I'm not familiar with that scenario, but it sounds like a situation where somebody, probably there was no crime ever, quote, witnessed.
Right.
Somebody might have had speculation that somebody was doing something wrong or whatever, but it wouldn't be proper under those terms. In case law, most of where citizens arrest appears, I mean, a lot of the case law is from over 100 years ago, but a lot of it is in cases just like in Brunswick, where you've got people do something and then they throw everything they can against the wall as a defense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was defending myself. I was committing a citizen's arrest, and I'm entitled to a jury charge of justification, and I'm entitled to immunity because of citizen's arrest. And the judges deny those things, and then they get convicted. And on appeal, the Court of Appeals reviews these things and says the trial court was correct in refusing a charge of justification, or in refusing to consider this a citizen's arrest. So there's very little substantive case law on it that actually really deals with real life citizens arrest quote situations. But I've challenged every sheriff that I've challenged everyone. Bring me the police reports and show me, don't tell me that you've been involved with, citizens that show me the reports. Show me where you've documented that you have gone out and responded to a scene and picked somebody up who has engaged in a citizen's arrest. And I have yet, and I'm not saying that's not out there, but I will tell you this much: I have yet to see it. Nobody uses this. Danny Porter was one of my witnesses that testified with me. Danny was either an assistant DA or DA in Gwinnett County for 40 years.
DA for a long time. Yep.
And he
darn good one too.
He's excellent. And Danny's testimony was he knew of one situation where it was attempted, and as he said, it went bad, and that person that attempted it actually was wrong. They thought they saw shoplifting and they actually didn't. Yeah. And that other than that, he's not familiar with it. This is just, this is something from the 1800s.
Yeah.
So, Bert, this is something that really came about. You're a floor leader for Governor Kemp. Mm-hmm. And this is really one of his initiatives. Is that right? I mean, he really he asked you to pick this up and carry it in your signature style. You've obviously gotten very detailed in your research. But it is one of the initiatives that Governor Kemp has outlined as part of his agenda for this legislative session. Is that right?
That's right. So last year when we came back from the COVID break, and that was after obviously the situation with Ahmaud and what happened had been well known and publicized at that point. There were discussions. In fact, Senator Strickland and I were looking at it, and there was discussions about doing something then, but we realized it needed more thought. And then Chairman F. Stration, my good friend, picked up the issue and held some hearings over it last summer and really did some great work. The analogy that I used is when I got involved in this in January, I was a Braves relief pitcher coming in after Greg Maddux pitched 6 perfect innings. That's how I felt. Like Chuck.
We all appreciate the baseball analogy, by the way.
Do what?
We all appreciate the baseball analogy.
I love sports analogies, but when so Chuck did a brilliant job setting it up, and the governor chose to make an initiative, which is why I got involved with it. And I got to tell you, I think it's important. I think it says a lot. I mean, when you're the governor of a state and something happens like what happened in Brunswick, and then honestly, the efforts to seemingly cover it up happen, and then you get this justification of we were committing a citizen's arrest. It almost becomes incumbent on you. You're the governor of this state. This horrible thing happened while you're the governor of the state. There's an obligation to lead from the highest level of leadership of the state to right this wrong. And as I said on the House floor, part of my speech to the House of Representatives was the incredible history of our Capitol in the room. And I said, if these walls could talk, what would they say? And the truth is that these walls would talk about a lot of really good things that have happened in that room, but there's also a lot of really bad things that have happened in that room. And the greatest opportunity that we have as legislators is when we get the opportunity to right a prior legislative wrong. And I think that this is something that absolutely fits that criteria. And frankly, I think that the body agreed with that. And I think that they honored that this was wrong. We don't need people playing police. We need to get rid of a law that's roots are absolutely based in the end of slavery and have been used to justify lynchings. I mean, the time, it was long overdue.
Yeah.
And Georgia, every state has some iteration of a citizen's arrest law. Georgia is right now standing to be the first state to repeal it. And it's my understanding that New York and South Carolina have introduced legislation to repeal their respective laws as a result of what we're doing. And it's a great opportunity for Georgia to be a leader on a situation where a tragedy of undescribable, I mean, just words fall short. And Georgia, took a national stage in the sense of just this absolutely horrific thing happening. It's a great opportunity for Georgia to lead and try to help Ahmaud's death not be in vain, and that there be, that his death can be an agent of change, and that there is legacy in that. And that's worthy for us to rally around, and it's worthy of us to do. And so I'm really, I don't know that I've ever felt the privilege of being involved with an issue like this. And I tell you, one of the things that I, a couple of weeks ago, I called Ahmaud's mom, Miss Wanda Cooper, and she's just sweet as she's just a sweet lady, heartbroken and pain and just grief. Mm-hmm. But she's so gracious in our conversation. She has so much dignity and grace with her thankfulness of what we are doing in trying to bring change to this. And that really put this whole thing, it's a very emotional issue already. Making that connection with her, I've talked to her several times and keeping her, informed of everything that's going on. And it's just, as a parent, you look at this through the lens of being a parent, and I just can't even imagine what it's like to be her. But it made me so proud to see everybody in that chamber vote yes for this. It was very significant, and it was frankly what we needed in Georgia. And I believe wholeheartedly we're going to get this thing through the Senate, and that the governor will sign this into law.
Bert, I think we all want to congratulate you again on a historic effort. And I know you're limited on time. You're free to stick with us as long as you want to, and join in the rest of the discussion if you can stick around. I do want to ask you. We were in day. I know Monday was day 28. Mm-hmm. I can't remember if they were in session yesterday. So we're in day 29 or 30 currently.
Today's
right?
Day 30. Yeah.
Today's day 30, which is the old crossover day. But so there are 10 days left in the session. Here's considering this is Governor Kemp's priority, it seems like the odds of passage are pretty good, but we all know you're going to keep working to get it done, and let us know how we can be helpful as well individually.
Well, I've really enjoyed this. My family's waiting on me for dinner, but I just want to say that I've enjoyed this, and I'd love to come back and come on again.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think a lot of you three guys, and I would love to be a part of this.
We were the two buzzes in the house. So.
Right, and one of us was, but Buzz and I would argue over who the real Buzz. The Georgia Tech caucus sticks together pretty good, but there would be some dissension pie when it came to who's got the best credentials as Buzz.
Yeah, I'm gonna go on record and say this because Bert. For those of you who don't know, Bert is a musician, and I actually sold him a guitar. At the end of last year, and I was offloading because I have actually way too many guitars. So I'm going to give the title to Bert, Buzz. I'm sorry.
Well, he wore those historic.
I'm going to break it for you.
He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. I never was, so
Yeah. I've got the veto right here. Right. I'm going to congratulate Bert for getting a unanimous vote in spite of opposition from the Georgia Sheriff's Association, which we all know is a huge political lift. Yep. It gives me a great deal of hope that one day we'll see civil asset forfeiture reform in Georgia.
I knew you were going there. If he didn't, I would have.
Because we got to win.
Baby steps, guys. Baby steps.
We've got to win Bert over. Bert is one of the speed bumps on our way to civil asset forfeiture reform.
Bert, next time we get together to play or talk about music, or even get together and play music, we're gonna have to talk about this because
I'll keep it.
I have authored papers on civil asset forfeiture.
So actually, seriously, I was at the Capitol today. There's a report in your office that we did that looks at the whole program. We surveyed, talked to a lot of law enforcement, and got some great feedback from them and some suggestions of how to make it better. So,
well, and this is and I'm about to sign off, but
get out of here, Bert. Bye.
No.
Sure you are.
The concept of reform on this is something that we should constantly be looking at. I know that there have been some bad examples. Yep. There have been some bad actors. There have been some situations that, shock the conscience. But, my thought has been let's address the outliers and figure out how to address the outliers and to tighten things up so that abuse, is less likely or much more difficult. There is a and I've actually tried, I've handled civil asset forfeiture cases in court, and I'm probably one of the only people. There's a couple of people in the General Assembly that have done that, but I've actually done it in court. And so I've carried that burden, which is a civil burden, not a criminal burden. But, I certainly know that it's not a rubber stamp. I know that it depends on your circumstances, right? And every judge is different and DAs are different, but I've always believed that we should address the outliers on that particular issue because I do think that there is value and merit to it. But I will always keep an open mind to the concept of reform of that, and that I pledge to y'all. So
awesome. Thanks, Bert. Thanks for your time tonight. And I didn't mean to take a shot. I just thought it was
you guys have a great night, and I will
too.
talk to y'all soon. All right.
Absolutely.
Go
Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Bert.
Later.
Go Dogs.
Big game tomorrow, Buzz. Big game. We play Miami beat Clemson.
Big upset. Yes.
We're trying to we're moving up in the seeds right now. So I'll talk to y'all later.
See you, Bert.
See you, Bert. So guys, we had obviously we had crossover day, and since we're on that theme, I know you guys were both watching pieces of legislation. You guys want to give us a status update of where those bills are?
I can update you on one piece, some bad news, and just some full disclosure. I'm a registered lobbyist. I'm for my employer, the Georgia Center for Opportunity.
Swamp.
And we were yes. But the transformation from humble public servant to evil lobbyist is complete. But we were working very hard on a piece of legislation. I've mentioned it before, Wes Cantrell's House Bill 60, which would have created personal education plans. We got close, maybe closer than we've ever gotten before. And Scott will remember we've taken votes on the floor before and landed well short. But we were really close this time, but not able to get it over the hump. It was on the calendar, but did not come up for a vote. So we will just warning the legislators who are against it. We'll be coming to chat with you. So.
Scott, what about you, buddy?
There are a couple of big stories that came out of crossover day, and we didn't really plan an agenda here. So this one might require us to have a conversation at some other point about this topic, and that was legislator pay. Legislator pay in Georgia. Look, I have no dog in this fight, right? And I voted against increasing my own pay just last year in the midst of a pandemic. So I see both sides of the argument here, but I also see the result of what our really low pay scale has gotten us in the way of retirees and independently wealthy people. That's who represents us in the Georgia House of Representatives and the Georgia State Senate. If you're not an extraordinarily wealthy person or a retiree, your likelihood of being able to serve in the legislature is really, really low. And it makes it really difficult for people like Buzz and I, who aren't independently wealthy, to be able to serve on an extended basis or at all. It's just not something that the average person can swing. So the speaker had appointed Wes Cantrell to be the chairman of a special committee on legislator compensation. They had something ready to go. The Senate fires up their bill. And there were in each chamber, there was this really unique thing that happened. And that is people who signed on to sponsor a piece of legislation voted against their own sponsored legislation. And it happened in the Senate. At least 9 people in the Senate who had signed on to the resolution for increasing pay for legislators voted against it when it came to the floor. At least 9, and which it blows my mind. I'd never seen that before. Did you, Buzz? I mean,
no, I've seen it happen before, but it was mostly in a case where the bill was amended and the person said,
Right.
I can't, that's a whole different
Right.
thing.
That's different altogether.
Right.
Yeah, those are the only instances I can think of.
Yeah,
It's kind of the John Kerry situation, right? They were for it before they were against it. I mean, it's a.
It really is. It's inexplicable in a way. So when the Senate killed theirs, the House was like, well, we're not going to take it up. If it can't even pass the Senate, we're not even going to call it to the floor for a vote. So basically, all of Wes's work in the committee, it just never came to fruition. Yeah. But there was another bill where a freshman legislator signed on to a piece of legislation, sits on the committee where the bill came from. So the bill gets assigned to Energy and Utilities. This freshman member is the 5th signer in this bill. It goes to Energy and Utilities. It comes out of that committee completely unanimously. It gets to the floor and she votes against the bill. And you could say it's just a freshman mistake or what have you, but I called her and I asked her about it. I'm going to do a piece on Peach Pundit. I'm trying to figure out how. The bill was authored by Philip Singleton. Philip is no friend of the woke, to put it in a hip term, I guess.
I don't think any of us are. Speaking as of his middle-aged white men,
I'm probably more friendly with the woke than, and I certainly Buzz is definitely more friendly with the woke than Philip is. Representative Singleton is the author of the girls' sports bill, which would prevent biological males who are transgendered from competing in girls' high school sports in Georgia.
Is not a friend of the woke.
He's not a friend of the woke.
If he ever had a woke card, that would revoke it.
Oh.
He's going to be in woke hell.
Yeah, and so this bill it has to do with broadband. SpaceX is launching 60 satellites a week, putting them in low Earth orbit. Elon Musk says anywhere on Earth, in the United States especially, you're going to have 300 megs a second download speeds. For a fairly hefty price, but you're going to have coverage, which would be instantaneous. In 3 or 4 days from now, we could have Georgia covered with 300 meg download speeds. In order to do that, though,
they'd have to. How much does this cost?
$100 a month. $100 a month. Which is not bad, right? It's comparable to what I'm paying Comcast for 200 megs a download. Yeah. So at any rate, it allows for broadband to expand the definition and so no longer be just terrestrial or earthbound wires. It would be airless signal or satellite would be included. So that's all it did. Now the bill goes through committee, has 2 committee hearings, subcommittee hearings, full committee, gets out of everything is unanimous, goes to rules. Rick Jaspers is sitting there. He's the one who moves for the bill to be moved to the floor. Rick votes against the bill on the floor. It is Philip Singleton's first bill, so when he gets to answer questions, he thinks this bill is really simple. There was no controversy. Nobody lobbied against me. Comcast and AT&T and all the guys in the hall never picked up the phone to call a single legislator to say, don't do this. No legislator has told me that they were lobbied against it. I have had legislators. I have a direct quote from a House Democrat that said that the speaker was sending a message to the author of the bill and the Democrats decided to join in. And so what's the message? So I talked to Philip and Philip's like, look, the speaker has told me that he wanted to help me get the bill passed. So I have to say that I'm working with the speaker on this. He let the bill get to the floor, but if you're, and let's give Philip
weird.
The benefit of the doubt. So there's all this mystery around why did the bill fail? Because the people who got up to ask the questions, typically when it's a legislator's first bill, they're like, hey, let's play around. Let's haze this guy.
Right.
When I got my first bill to the floor, it had to do with local elections. And I got asked a question about raw milk, because I like food freedom or something. So, I mean, that's when Shaw Blackman came to the floor with his first vote, I got up and asked him a question of how could you find yourself in the well when you couldn't find your car in the parking deck last week and you needed me to help you find your car? Those are the types of questions legislators usually get on their first piece of legislation, right, Buzz?
That's true.
Yeah. So Philip goes to the well. It's his first bill. He's thinking, I'm going to get to play around here a little bit. And the very first question's from Penny Houston, who don't play.
No.
Right.
When Miss Penny comes after you, you're in trouble.
Not exactly setting a positive tone here.
No. And immediately you realize that Philip is not being hazed. He's being interrogated. And the second person to get up to ask a question is Sam Watson. And Sam asked some questions about whether or not this would hurt rural Georgia at all. And Philip gives him a very long-winded answer of no. Now, at this point, if I'm Philip, but I have 8 years in the legislature. So at this point, I would have realized I got to get out of this well. I'm not yielding to any more questions. I would have bailed at that point.
Yeah.
But the speaker doesn't even ask Philip if he wants to yield for any more questions. He immediately moves on and calls on Terry England, who is recognizably the speaker's best friend. Okay. Terry gets up and he kind of is jovial at first. He goes, "Why are you so scared?" And Philip's playing around. He goes, "You have intimidating facial hair," and so they're having this because Philip still thinks he's getting hazed, right? And Terry's asking questions about whether or not this is going to screw rural Georgia out of broadband. And he's very serious. And he's trying to say, Philip's trying to say no. He's trying to answer questions very seriously. No, he's very long-winded. And the longer winded you are when you're in this scenario, the worse off you are.
Yeah.
And when I talked to the representative who voted against the bill as the fifth signer, she told me that the presentation of the bill made her believe that it was no longer a fair marketplace. Which I watched it. I don't get that, but that's what was her interpretation. She's free for that to reach that conclusion. So it's really strange, this story. And so I got a message from somebody who basically claims that the Democrats were promised 2 pieces of legislation if they locked down. They were promised that the speaker would call 2 Democrat bills if they would vote against that bill.
Wow.
And so that's an allegation at this point, and I've heard that from multiple people, and I don't want to reveal sources. And one of my sources has definitely said, you can refer to me as a House Democrat, but that's all I want you to say.
That's wild. That's a wild story. And I've heard of those, Buzz, I think you were a state representative when I was still blogging at Peach Fund, and we all, before that, we always heard the stories of, those sort of backroom deals and trading favors to kill a bill or whatever the case may be. But I've never heard of something that vicious. Okay, it's not really that vicious, but like it's that underhanded. It's that sneaky.
Yeah, I'll just say this, okay, because I'm sure there's going to be some member of the House Majority Caucus who's going to be watching this, and they're going to run to leadership and say, Scott Turner said. I'm absolutely.
You're gone and you're still a problem.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm always going to be. I'm not going anywhere. But here's the thing, right? Philip is not willing to throw the speaker under the bus on this, right?
Yeah.
Where I'm getting my information is from other members. I talked to Representative Camp, who voted against her own bill. I talked to, I asked her if I could go on the record with her, and she said yes. I have quotes from her for a piece I'm working for Peach Pundit on. I've talked to House Democrats. I have a really good relationship with several House Democrats. We worked on several pieces of legislation. I sat between Vernon Jones and Carla Drenner, as an example. I haven't spoken to Carla about this bill. She was excused for the vote. She wasn't even there. But the Democrats that I have spoken to have been very forthcoming and saying, yeah, there was a deal made. And Philip is like, well, I don't know what the message is because the speaker hasn't told me there's a message. I'm just going to assume the best of David Ralston and that that's not true. And the Democrats are just trying to make up a story. So we'll see, I'm working on it still.
Well,
we'll see what happens.
Well, my bill that I was disappointed didn't get called for a vote was HB 358, which was Setzler's bill dealing with emergency powers. I think I mentioned this on a previous podcast that I wrote a piece for the Pegasus Institute, which is a Kentucky-based think tank on this very subject, and wanted to see the powers of governors across the country curtailed in some way, given the breadth of power they showed during the pandemic, and have some measure of approval process, instead put in place. Governor can do this, but after a certain period of time, the legislature has to come in and ratify it. Yeah. I think that's the way to go, and because I don't think one person should have that much power in their hands. That's just my 2 cents. But unfortunately, it didn't get called up. But there's still some good bills that got passed, as Bert noted, his bill being one of them. We're running. I mean, they're running out of days to get stuff done. And Scott, to your point on legislator pay, I've never, whenever this issue comes up in Congress, I'm always very reluctant. When it comes to congressional staff, that's where I think you have a real pay problem. Because I think the congressional staff are largely underpaid, not excepting chiefs. Chiefs are overpaid. Some of these chiefs make $150,000, $170,000 a year. Members make around 177 less year in leadership, but these chiefs make a ton of money, whereas legislative directors and these LAs, legislative assistants, who do a lot of the grunt work on policy, don't really make that much. LDs may make $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 a year, but those are, what I've found, are generally exceptions. LAs barely make $50,000, $55,000, $60,000 a year if they're lucky. And those in DC, the cost of living is much higher than it is here in Atlanta. When it comes to the state legislature, it's a part-time job, right? But you guys both know
it's not.
No. Hold on, I'm getting there, Scott. Hold on.
Go ahead. I'm holding. Go ahead.
Don't scream at me yet. But it is a quote unquote part-time job. You make $18,000 a year, roughly, right, guys?
17, yeah.
So
17, 18, yeah.
$18,000 a year. But it is effectively a full-time job, because when you're in session, you basically have to put your professional life on hold and for 3-4 months, depending on how fast Ralston and the lieutenant governor, in this case Duncan, want to get out of there. It can be trying, I'm sure, especially, and even when you're not in session, you're still dealing with constituents. You're still dealing with special interests who are coming to you, preparing for the next session. You're dealing with legislative work in between the sessions, so you're dealing with a lot of stuff. And also, they may call you in for a special session at some point, in which case you have to put your life back on hold for a week or two, or however long the special session is called.
Which happened to me on at least 2 occasions, right? I mean, I had 2 special sessions, plus last year having to come back in after taking a break.
Right. But I guess go ahead.
I think one of the reasons this is important, what the right pay is, and et cetera, I don't know. But one reason it's important is you want to, being a citizen legislature that is ostensibly part-time, you want as wide a variety of experiences as possible. You want teachers to be able to be there. You want engineers. You want every profession you can think of. You need some representation there, because you can't be no legislator can be an expert on everything. And when a bill comes before you that deals with a very technical matter dealing with engineers, it'd be great to have an engineer there who can talk about what how this would impact their industry. So I think that's why that's why this issue needs to be addressed. There are other ways to do it. You could increase the per diem. You could allow additional. In the House, they were limited. I don't know what they are now, but when I was there, when Scott was there, I think it was 10 quote unquote committee of 1 days, and that allows you to do work in your district. So you kind of group events and things together. Increasing that number could help. So there's other ways to do it besides raising the salary, but it absolutely needs to be looked at.
Well, so I was going to say I do think the salary probably should be raised, and it probably should be indexed to inflation, cost of living adjustments, things like that. The question is how much, because 18. I mean, it's what it is now is what it was, 10 years ago. Yeah, and I imagine the per diem formula has
longer than that. Yeah. Per diem's 173 a day, and if you live within 50 miles of the capital, it's taxable.
Yep.
Yeah. So Yeah, I was
47
taxed.
miles from the Capitol. I was taxed.
43. Yeah, I was taxed.
But
Yeah.
my whole point is, yeah, let's raise it. But the question, like, and this is a question I think that, you know, the legislature should come back and answer. But we also live in very populous times where the legislature has to address it. But we live in very populous times where, you know, when, I mean, I have seen, I mean, Scott, you used to post Facebook posts about this, and I've seen other legislators who I'm friends with on Facebook post about this. I think Buzz, you might have posted about it. How many emails do you guys get on a regular basis where they think you're a member of Congress?
Oh yeah.
Oh, all the time.
Yes.
Every day.
Yeah.
Every day. Yeah.
So
every day.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, so when they see the legislature is going to vote themselves a pay raise, I'm sure you make too much money up there in Washington D.C. You know,
Sure.
and that's the position you guys get in. It's and you know, especially because Georgia has, you know, we're a balanced budget, and, you know, money, especially with COVID, those pay raises would have cut deep inside the legislature's budget. But before because we're getting close to an hour, and before we move on, I wanted to bring up a little bit of federal work, because that's my particular bailiwick. So we had Congress today passed the HR, what was it? HR, I forgot it's the American Recovery Plan Act.
Yeah.
HR 1913, I think is what it is, or 1319. Yeah, $1.9 trillion, including a boatload, billions of dollars to states. And I wanted to get you guys' reactions to it.
Well, I think I was listening to the Commentary Magazine podcast today. They made a great point. This piece of legislation right now polls very well, because what people are hearing about is about how they're all about to get $1,400 a piece per taxpayer, etc. And they're thinking of what they're going to spend that money on. But there are some really unbelievable things in there. One of them that came to light today in an article in the Wall Street Journal. Part of it, if the state of Georgia accepts this money, they will not be allowed to cut taxes for the next couple of years.
Right.
There's a bill, I believe it passed the House, that would lower the state income tax a little bit. So, you know, Governor Kemp's going to be faced with a choice. Personally, I hope he signs the tax cut and tells Joe Biden, "I'll see your butt in court, pal."
Well,
that's an unbelievable overreach. But there's
so
a whole
the
host
income
of
tax,
things
okay,
like that once they come to light, I think the popularity of this is going to go down. And look, we're facing an inflation problem. We're going to be facing an inflation problem.
Right. Well, Scott, before you chime in here, let me just know, because one of my old colleagues at FreedomWorks pointed this out to me, one of my old staffers, and she brought it to my attention, and I said my initial reaction was one thing was, you know, yeah, it's going to force states not to cut their taxes, and the fear there, I think, largely comes from states supplanting revenue with this bailout that to be honest, states don't need, and that's the other thing. That's tacit admission from my perspective that states really don't need this money.
Yep.
Well, yeah. So back to the tax cut that was on the table for Georgia. This is something that's really important, right? Because several years ago, I had a bill where I tried to index our standard deduction to inflation. Mm-hmm. And in order to take the state standard deduction, you have to take the federal standard deduction, because the federal is so high now under the Trump tax plan. Everybody in Georgia is now taking the standard deduction. It's just the way it is. Now, what ends up happening is ours is set, period. It's not indexed to inflation. When I tried to do that, actually, Jay Powell, the former Ways and Means chairman and Rules chairman, took it and made it part of one of his pieces of legislation. And I thought because Jay had taken it that it got passed into law. So when I saw this year that they were going to raise the standard deduction, Shaw Blackman's bill that I posted about on Peach Pundit, I was like, I actually reached out to Shaw and said, I thought we already did this. And he's like, no, we're going to have to do it manually. But the federal standard deduction raises automatically every year. So I think an argument could potentially be made that our tax cut this year is matching what federal government policy is. And so, yeah, give us the money. Ultimately.
I've read some commentary that this is unconstitutional, and I admittedly I'm not very well aware of the constitutional arguments, particularly as it relates to tax policy here. Do either of you know? Have you guys studied those issues, or have you looked into it at all?
Yeah, there is a coercion clause someplace, somewhere. I have to go get read up on.
So it basically be like the same thing, the same way they did the Supreme Court struck down the automatic Medicaid expansion back in
well, I mean,
ACA.
And that's an anti-commandeering clause
Right.
case. We have several of those in the books now. Sebelius versus NFIB is being the latest iteration of that. But it's the anti-commandeering doctrine has been well established in case law, and I think it is something that you'll see states push back on and say, no, you can't put conditions on us like this.
Yeah. Well, any final thoughts before we head out tonight, guys?
Well, I just had one question that I thought it might be fun to throw in some other stuff that's maybe not political. And I finished a book, and it's an old book called An American Renaissance, a strategy for the 80s by Jack Kemp, one of my political heroes, written in 1978. And what's really obviously, it's written for the times, and it's talking about issues that were going on in the late 70s. But what I loved about it was it reminded me of the Reagan years, and Jack Kemp was a huge influence on Ronald Reagan, and just the optimism, the inclusiveness. Jack Kemp was a guy who wanted an inclusive Republican Party that embraced everyone and worked to make sure that every single American, even the poorest Americans, participated in the promise of America. And I miss those days when conservatives were optimistic and forward-looking and inclusive and embracing, like Jack Kemp was. So,
well, Kemp, not just your hero, Paul Ryan's and others. And Scott, speaking of books written by politicians from the 80s and 90s, I have actually been, I don't know if I've ever told you about this book, but Henry Hyde actually he was the sponsor of CAFRA, the Civil Asset Forfeiture Reform Act of 2000, actually wrote a book called Forfeiting Our Property Rights. Is Your Property Safe from Seizure? And it's entirely about civil asset forfeiture. You can find it on Amazon, hardcover, $10.45.
All right.
Wow.
Well, mine's from The Adult in the Room. My recommendation is Them by Ben Sasse. I know how much Jason absolutely loves himself some Ben Sasse.
I just wish thankfully he voted for conviction, and I applaud him for that. But like, the dude just talked so damn much and never did anything. And he's also really bad on criminal justice.
Maybe that's why I like him so much. He's a kindred spirit.
He's also really bad on criminal justice reform. But that's a discussion for another day.
But in this particular book, Them by Ben Sasse, Why We Hate Each Other and How to Heal, is so good. I made my children read it, and we've discussed it at dinner time on several occasions. But it's about the polarization, the politicization, the politainment industry, and how news is not interested in reporting news. It's really interested. It's really they're designed to get you outraged constantly and all the time, and how to tune it out, how to focus on what really matters. He focuses really on how to serve wherever you are with what you have, the people around you. And it's definitely written by somebody who has a servant's heart. And I'd highly recommend that, Them by Ben Sasse.
I agree with the sentiment there. And I think that's because I cut out cable news back in 2015. And I think I've been a lot mentally healthier with the exception of some things like January 6th, for example, that have occurred. I think I've been a lot mentally healthier, and I haven't listened to talk radio in even longer, thankfully, which also was driving me up a wall. Every now and then I'll tune into Eric, but not that often. I don't want to.
Yeah, Eric mentioned me on the radio just before I came on, so my phone blew up early on. So,
nice.
Every time Eric mentions my name, people text me to tell me, "Hey, Eric just talked about you."
Well, that's kind of I was going into this. I mean, that's the thing I want this podcast to be is we're gonna have our disagreements with the other side. I know all three of us are center right. Certainly, I'm the more radical of the three. Maybe Scott's arguably more radical.
Yeah, come on, bro.
But we come on here, we're respectful in our disagreement. We don't take pot shots, and that's kind of what I want us to be. This is not just polititainment. This is we want to have serious discussion about Georgia and politics, as well as a little bit DC mixed in. But yeah, for now though, until next week, please download, like, subscribe to the Peach Funded Podcast. We'll be back next week. I don't know why you're pointing down. I mean, it could be up there, it could be over there, it could be over there.
I'm always on the bottom, so I'm gonna point down because this is where the like and subscribe button is. Just make sure you're clicking on those things.
But in the until then, wish you guys a good rest of the week and take care. Thanks, guys.
All right.
See you guys.